Hello everyone, Hira here. Now we are going to listen to podcast news which includes national, international and business, economy, news. While walking in the morning or evening, while cooking, cycling or during free time you can listen. It will enhance your learning and understanding of various accents and pronunciations. Listening improves the quality of communication and comprehension. Before going ahead, I would like to welcome you all to the virtual school, a new way of learning and teaching, with the vision of let's grow together. Our mission is to learn how to learn and teach how to teach. So stay tuned. And here we go. 9th June 2021. Important national news. Center places fresh orders for 44 crore. COVID-19 vaccine doses govt. Also books 30 crore doses of vaccine under trial. Special correspondent New Delhi. The center has placed fresh orders for 44 crore vaccine doses of Covishield and Covaxin, which will be available from August-December. It has also placed an order for 30 crore doses from Hyderabad-based Biological E for its in-development protein subunit vaccine. Altogether 74 crore doses have been secured for use from August onwards, Dr. V.K. Paul, Chairman, National Empowered Group on Vaccination, said in a press statement on Tuesday. Until July, 53 crore vaccine doses, including 23.5 crore already administered, were expected from Serum Institute of India and Bharat Biotech. If all the estimates were to come to fruition, it would mean 127 crore doses could be available, enough to ensure India's estimated population of about 94 crore gets one dose of vaccine. However, a lot depends on the speed at which vaccines are dispersed. After a lackluster May that saw vaccine stocks and immunization plummet, the number of daily doses have started to rise after May 29th, touching over 30 lakh on several days. Ensure no break in studies of children hit by pandemic, Supreme Court accepts amicus curiae's suggestion. Legal correspondent New Delhi. The Supreme Court has ordered the states and the union territories to ensure there is no break in the education of children orphaned due to COVID-19. The state governments' union territories are directed to make provisions for continuance of education of the children both in government as well as in private schools, a bench of Justices L. Nageshwar Rao and Aniruddha Bose ordered. The order, published on Tuesday, came after amicus curiae, Advocate Gaurav Agrawal, voiced concerns that these children may have to discontinue their education because of lack of funds and familial care. Mr. Agrawal had recommended the court to intervene and direct the states to make sure that the children impacted by the pandemic continue in the same school. He said the states should be asked to pass directions that even children studying in private schools should continue in the same institutions for at least the next 6 months until some further arrangements could be worked out. We accept the suggestion made by the amicus curiae. The state government union territory administrations should ensure that there is no break in the education of children who have become orphans or lost either parent during the pandemic, the Supreme Court ordered. The bench said it would examine other issues related to COVID-19 impacted children, including protection of their property rights of the children, their further education and employment opportunities and special care to be taken in respect of the girl child. These issues would be taken up in the next hearing on June 27. Nepal stops distribution of Coronil kits, order says procedures not followed during procurement. Kallol Bhattacharjee, New Delhi. Nepal's Department of Ayurveda and Alternative Medicines on Monday stopped distribution of Coronil kits that were gifted by the Patanjali Group of Indian yoga teacher and businessman Ramdev. Kathmandu's order cited that proper procedures were not followed while procuring the 1,500 kits of Coronil that Patanjali claims are useful in dealing with the COVID-19 infection. Move to Delhi. The issue has drawn attention as it is being interpreted as a move to delink the leading Madhesi political families from the Indian group. The latest order of the government of Nepal says, the tablets and nasal oil that are part of the Coronil kit are not equivalent to medicines to defeat COVID-19 virus. Free rice offer boosts vaccination drive. Circle officer in Arunachal hit upon idea to push those above 45 years to take jab. Special correspondent Guwahati. An administrative circle in Arunachal Pradesh has scaled up vaccination among those above 45 years of age with a free rice offer. Rumors about COVID-19 vaccines causing impotency and microchips being injected through them have deterred many in the northeast, specifically those above 45 years, from taking the jab. Requests and threats have not worked in districts such as Baksa in Assam, which have among the lowest vaccination coverage in India. Tashi Wangchuk Thongdok, the circle officer of Yajli in Lower Subansiri district of Arunachal Pradesh, hit upon the idea of giving 20 kilograms of rice free to each person aged 45 plus who came forward to get inoculated. The offer worked. More than 50 persons turned up on Monday for vaccination despite heavy rain. We have been working on various strategies to improve the vaccination coverage in the Yajli circle. We wish to continue giving away free rice until we achieve 100% coverage by June 20, Mr. Thongdok, a 2016 batch officer of Arunachal Pradesh Civil Service, said. He thanked two local activists, Thaba Nagu and Lich Birbal, for donating the rice for distribution. New Election Commissioner appointed. Special Correspondent New Delhi. President Ramnath Kovind on Tuesday appointed Anup Chandra Pandey, a retired Uttar Pradesh cadre IAS officer, to the post of Election Commissioner. The Law Ministry notified the appointment late on Tuesday evening. Following the elevation of Sushil Chandra as the CEC, the position of an EC was vacant since April 13. I thank Your Honor. Schoolgirl tells CJI she cites steps to handle pandemic. CJI Lord's letter. Thoughtful gesture. The illustration that accompanied 10-year-old Lidvina Joseph's letter. Special arrangement. Krishnadas Rajagopal, New Delhi. A 10-year-old Kerala schoolgirl has written to Chief Justice of India, CJI, N.V. Ramana, saying how happy and proud she felt to see the Supreme Court make vital interventions to alleviate the sufferings of her fellow citizens in the grip of the pandemic. I am happy and feel proud Your Honorable Court has moved orders for supply of oxygen and saved many lives. I understood Your Honorable Court has initiated effective steps in bringing down COVID-19 and death rate in our country, especially in Delhi. I thank Your Honor for this. Now I feel very proud and happy. Lidvina Joseph, a Class V student from Thrissur in Kerala, wrote in the letter that the Supreme Court received towards May end. Lidvina said she got the news from the Hindu, adding that she had been much worried about the deaths caused by the virus. The handwritten letter, in the form of a scroll, is accompanied by a colorful illustration showing a bespectacled judge using his gavel to give the coronavirus a knock on its head. A portrait of the Mahatma hangs from a wall behind the judge. Chief Justice Ramana replied to Lidvina, saying, I have received your beautiful letter along with a heartwarming illustration of the judge at work. He conveyed that she was impressed by the way she kept track of the happenings in the country. He particularly took note of the students' concern for the well-being of her compatriots. I am sure you will grow up into an alert, informed and responsible citizen who will contribute immensely towards nation building, he said. Chief Justice Ramana also sent her a signed copy of the Constitution. New norms for digital content. Children with special needs must find it operable, understandable, center. Learning activities must include multimodal experiences, norms say. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. The Education Ministry has laid down new guidelines for producing digital education resources for children with disabilities, after a year in which the COVID-driven shift to online education has spotlighted the lacuna in such resources. However, the PDF document containing the guidelines does not even follow its own rules, making it partially inaccessible to the visually challenged, says an activist, raising concerns about effective implementation. Guidelines released. The guidelines, released by Education Minister Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank on Tuesday, are based on 4 guiding principles, stipulating that all resources must be perceivable, operable, understandable and robust for disabled students. They recommend that all textbooks be made digitally accessible in a phased manner, so that they are available in multiple formats such as text, audio, video and sign language with turn-on and turn-off features. Detailed technical standards have been provided. The closure of regular schools and learning centers due to COVID-19 has led to special difficulties for many disabled children. For instance, a recent study by the Vidya Center for Legal Policy showed that more than half of the insert textbooks available on the government's virtual education platform Diksha were not accessible for visually impaired students. Supplementary content. The guidelines provide strategies to produce supplementary content for varying disabilities, including students who face visual and hearing challenges, those on the autism spectrum, those with intellectual or special learning disabilities, and those with multiple disabilities. They note that learning activities must include audio, visual and tactile experiences, while evaluation must be multimodal. Ironically enough, while the guidelines call for the use of image descriptions wherever pictures are used in order to be accessible to visually challenged students using screen readers, this is not even followed by the guidelines document itself, according to Muralidharan, Secretary, National Platform for the Rights of the Disabled. So much for a document that talks of e-accessibility, he said. As guidelines, they are very comprehensive and cover all aspects. Concerns of each disability are identified and solutions worked around them. How far they would be implemented is something that we will have to see. The taste of the pudding will lie in its eating. The guidelines do include an implementation roadmap. The next steps are the nomination of an expert technical team to update the Diksha platform, followed by training and development of prototypes of the accessible digital textbooks. Crackdown on fake medicine. Interpol-led Operation Pangaea 14 targeted sale of counterfeit health products. Fake surgical masks were seized as part of the effort. Devesh K. Pandey, New Delhi. More than 1.1 lakh web links, including websites and online marketplaces, have been taken down in an operation involving the police, customs and health regulatory authorities of 92 countries against the sale of fake and illicit medicines and medical products. Codenamed Operation Pangaea 14, the exercise was coordinated by Interpol. Indian agencies also participated in the operation, said an official of the Central Bureau of Investigation, that is the nodal body for the Interpol in the country. The operation resulted in 113,020 web links being closed down or removed, the largest since the first, Operation Pangaea, conducted in 2008, the arrest of 277 suspects and seizure of potentially dangerous pharmaceuticals worth over $23 million. It showed that criminals were continuing to cash in on the huge demand for personal protection and hygiene products due to the COVID-19 pandemic. More than half of all the medical devices seized during the operation from May 18 to 25 were fake and unauthorized COVID-19 test kits. In the United Kingdom, apart from the seizure of some 3 million fake medicines and devices worth over $13 million, the authorities removed more than 3,100 advertising links for the illegal sale and supply of unlicensed medicines, and shut down 43 websites, Interpol said in a statement on Tuesday. A person in Venezuela was arrested for developing an e-commerce platform on WhatsApp to sell illicit medicines. In Italy, authorities recovered more than 500 000 fake surgical masks as well as 35 industrial machines used for production and packaging, said the statement, adding that globally, about 9 million medical devices and illicit pharmaceuticals were seized. As the pandemic forced more people to move their lives online, criminals were quick to target these new customers, said Interpol Secretary General Jurgen Stock. During the operation, searches of about 7.10 lakh packages led to the discovery of fake and illicit drugs concealed amongst a range of legitimate products, including clothes, jewelry, toys, food and baby products. In Qatar, officials discovered 2,805 nerve pain tablets hidden inside tins of baked beans, said the Interpol. The seized items included hypnotic and sedative medication, erectile dysfunction pills, medical and surgical devices like COVID test kits, masks, syringes, catheters, analgesics, painkillers, anabolic steroids, antiseptics and germicides, anti-cancer medication, anti-malarials and vitamins. Ladakh reserves all jobs for region residents. A welcome but delayed move. Pirzada Ashik. All jobs in the Union Territory, UT, of Ladakh have been reserved for the residents of the region, according to an order issued on Tuesday. No person shall be qualified for appointment to the service unless the person is a resident of the UT of Ladakh, reads the order issued by Lieutenant Governor R.K. Mathur. The new recruitment rules are mentioned in the Clause 11 of the Union Territory of Ladakh Employment, Subordinate, Service Recruitment Rules, 2021. The move has met a long-pending demand of the people of Ladakh, after it was carved out as a UT on 5 August 2019. It was our demand since the bifurcation of J&K almost 2 years ago. It's a welcome move, Chief Executive Councillor, Ladakh Autonomous Hill Development Council Kargil, Feroz Ahmed Khan told The Hindu. He said the order has come very late as many unemployed youths have crossed the upper age limit in the past 2 years. We will also demand age relaxation for fresh recruitments, Mr. Khan said. He said there should be similar laws on land too. At present, the state land of the UT comes under twin elected councils, Leh and Kargil. However, private land does not have any protection. Mr. Khan said till the centre meets the demand of the 6th schedule for the UT, it should also grant legislative powers to the twin councils. Rendma Nagas demand Autonomous Council their right to Union Home Minister and Assam Chief Minister, asking for their voices to be heard. Vijayta Singh, New Delhi. The Rendma Nagas in Assam have written to Union Home Minister Amit Shah demanding an autonomous district council amid a decision by the central and the state governments to upgrade the Karbi Anglong Autonomous Council, KAK, into a territorial council. The Rendma Naga People's Council, RNPC, a registered body, said in the memorandum that the Renmas were the first tribal people in Assam to have encountered the British in 1839, but the existing Renma Hills was eliminated from the political map of the state and replaced with that of Mikir Hills, now Karbi Anglong, in 1951. Narrating its history, the council said that during the Burmese invasions of Assam in 1816 and 1819, it was the Renmas who gave shelter to the Ahom refugees. The petition said that the Renma Hills was partitioned in 1963 between Assam and Nagaland at the time of creation of Nagaland state, and the Karbis, who were known as Mikirs till 1976, were the indigenous tribal people of Mikir Hills. Thus, the Renma Hills and Mikir Hills were two separate entities till 1951. Karbis have no history in the Renma Hills. People who are presently living in Renma Hills are from Assam, Arunachal Pradesh and Meghalaya. They speak different dialects and do not know Karbi language of Karbi Anglong, the memorandum said. RNPC President K. Solomon Renma told The Hindu that the government was on the verge of taking a decision without taking them on board, and thus they had written to Mr. Shah and Chief Minister Hemant Biswa Sarma. How can they do this? We have been writing to them for many years. The Kark population is around 12 lakh and the Karbis constitute only 3 lakh. The remaining are non-Karbis, including the Renma Nagas, whose population is around 22,000. We are also demanding a separate legislative seat for Renmas, he said. The National Socialist Council of Nagaland, or NSCN, Isakmuiva, which is in talks with the Center for a Peace Deal, said in a statement on Monday that the Renma issue was one of the important agendas of the Indo-Naga political talks, and no authority should go far enough to override their interests. More than 3,000 Renma Nagas were forced to relocate to relief camps in 2013 after several people were killed in a series of attacks following a call given by a Karbi insurgent group. Rajnath Lord's India-Sweden ties in defense production minister points to growing co-development options. Close network. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh releasing the first copy of the SIDMA Members Directory 2020-2021.txt. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. There is lot of scope for Swedish and Indian defense industries for co-production and co-development, and Indian industry can also supply components to Swedish industries, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh said on Tuesday. On behalf of Government of India, I would like to extend an invitation to a delegation at highest level from Sweden to India and have a glimpse of Indian defense industries and defense industry corridors, Mr. Singh said at an India-Sweden defense industry webinar. Welcoming the recent understanding by India and European Union to resume negotiations on a free trade agreement, Swedish Defence Minister Peter Hultqvist said one area with potential for deepening defence industry cooperation was amongst small and medium enterprise (SME) businesses. A memorandum of understanding was signed during the event between Society of Indian Defence Manufacturers and Swedish Security and Defence Industry Association to promote bilateral defence industrial relations. 25% of vaccines for private hospitals is a license to loot. CPI-M demands an immediate withdrawal of the clause. Commuters travelling in the metro on Monday in New Delhi. Shivkumar Pushpakar. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. The centre's failed vaccine policy has not been fully reversed, the CPI-M Politburo said in a statement here. By reserving 25% of vaccines for the private sector, the party said, the government was providing them with a license to loot. The party demanded an immediate withdrawal of this clause. 2. to bring in 100% universally free vaccines. The CPI-M Politburo said the Modi government had been forced to withdraw its liberalized vaccine policy for three reasons: a strong opposition, pushback from states, and the Supreme Court's criticism. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's efforts to lay the blame at the door of the state governments, the party said, was condemnable. The liberalized vaccine policy was a unilateral decision made by the centre. However, the failed vaccine policy has not been fully reversed. The government has chosen to continue the dual pricing policy. As much as 25% of vaccine production is still reserved for the private sector. This is nothing but a license for loot by private manufacturers to make super profits, the statement said. And this 25% diversion of vaccines, the CPI-M said, came at a time of acute vaccine shortage. This would dilute and weaken the need for universal vaccination, essential to prevent a third wave of COVID-19. The centre must procure all the vaccines manufactured in India and bought globally, and distribute it to states in consultation with them, the statement said. Adopt a transparent policy in allocating vaccines. Congress spell out roadmap of meeting deadline by December, it tells Govt. Jairam Ramesh. Sandeep Saxena. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. A day after Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the reversion to the centralized procurement of COVID-19 vaccines from June 21, the Congress on Tuesday asked the government to adopt a transparent policy in allocating vaccines to the states and spell out a roadmap of meeting its own deadline of fully vaccinating 100 crore citizens by December. The Congress reiterated its demand for free universal vaccination, whether these vaccines are administered in a private hospital or a government one, and questioned the government's decision of continuing with the policy of allowing the private sector to obtain 25% of the vaccine production. Addressing a virtual press conference, former Union Minister Jairam Ramesh claimed that 50% of the vaccines meant for the private sector had been grabbed by 9 major hospital groups with presence in metro cities, and that was a dangerous situation, as it affected supply to smaller hospitals in non-metros and small towns. The government should also do away with the procedure of registering oneself in the CoWIN app and set up walk-in vaccination for all categories. This government is headline-driven and not deadline-driven, Mr. Ramesh said. The government must work out a transparent allocation formula in consultation with states for providing vaccines, as we have seen that BJP-ruled states have been favored by the central government in the past in allocation of vaccines and medicines, he alleged. Take action against illegal adoption. It directs Gov to prevent private entities from revealing identity of children orphaned by pandemic. Krishnadas Rajagopal, New Delhi. The Supreme Court has directed the states and the union territories to take stringent action against private individuals and NGOs who invite people to illegally adopt children orphaned by the COVID-19 pandemic. A bench of Justices L. Nageshwar Rao and Aniruddha Bose, in an 18-page order published on Tuesday, directed the government to step in and prevent private entities from revealing the identities of affected children, usually on social media, and inviting people to adopt them. The state governments' union territories are directed to prevent any NGO from collecting funds in the names of the affected children by disclosing their identity and inviting interested persons to adopt them. No adoption of affected children should be permitted contrary to the provisions of the Juvenile Justice Act, 2015, the court ordered. Kara involvement. It was illegal to invite strangers to adopt children, already traumatized by their personal losses, without the involvement of the Central Adoption Resource Authority, CARA, a statutory body under the Women and Child Development Ministry, it said. Invitation to persons for adoption of orphans is contrary to law, as no adoption of a child can be permitted without the involvement of CARA. Stringent action shall be taken by the state governments, union territories against agencies, individuals who are responsible for indulging in this illegal activity, it observed. The order came after the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, NCPCR, on Monday, raised the alarm on a spate of complaints about illegal adoption of COVID-19 orphans through private individual and organizations. Social media posts are circulating that children are up for adoption. This is plainly illegal and violates the Juvenile Justice Act, Advocate Shobha Gupta, for Intervena, We the Women of India, made an impassioned plea. NCPCR statistics show that 3,621 children were orphaned, 26,176 children lost either parent, and 274 abandoned between 1st April 2021 to 5th June 2021. The court is hearing a suo motu case on the plight of children impacted by the pandemic. Child trafficking. Advocate Gaurav Agrawal, amicus curiae, said cases of child trafficking have been going up. The government should intervene to care and protect children orphaned, abandoned, or whose families have lost their earning members. The court said lack of knowledge about the rights of children under the Juvenile Justice Act had led to many falling victim to efforts at illegal adoption. It directed the center, states and the union territories to give wide publicity to the provisions of the 2015 Act at regular intervals so as to make the general public, children and their parents or guardians aware of such provisions. It ordered the states and the union territories to continue with their efforts to identify children in need of care and protection after March 2020 and upload their details on the NCPCR database in order to provide them welfare schemes. Thank you. International news. BRICS opposes exceptionalism. China Beijing frames BRICS ministers' statement as opposing the West, emphasizes on multilateralism. Looking ahead, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin in Beijing, in this file photo. Reuters Tingshu Wang. Anant Krishnan. China on Monday sought to frame a joint statement from the foreign ministers of the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, countries, who met virtually last week, as standing in opposition to what Beijing has increasingly hit out at, bloc politics, from the United States and the West. The BRICS foreign ministers, at a virtual meet last week, put out a joint statement on multilateralism, in addition to the usual ministers' press statement. China's foreign ministry on Monday said the idea behind the statement was to forge a common understanding among the BRICS countries when there were so many different interpretations and definitions of multilateralism in the world. Ironically, among the targets of Beijing's recent attacks on what it calls selective multilateralism, is the India-Australia-Japan U.S. Quad grouping, which Chinese officials have repeatedly criticized. India, which is the BRICS chair this year and will host this year's Leaders Summit, which may also take place virtually, finds itself in a curious position of being described by Beijing as both a partner and a target in its recent emphasis on the importance of multilateralism, and its criticism of calls for a rules-based order, voiced not only by the US but also by the Quad multilateral system. On the different interpretations of multilateralism, the BRICS countries, as representatives of emerging markets and developing countries, have tackled the problem head-on and given their answer, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said. The BRICS joint statement on strengthening and reforming the multilateral system laid out the following principles, he added. First, it should make global governance more inclusive, representative and participatory to facilitate greater and more meaningful participation of developing and least developed countries. Second, it should be based on inclusive consultation and collaboration for the benefit of all. Third, it should make multilateral organizations more responsive, action-oriented and solution-oriented based on the norms and principles of international law and the spirit of mutual respect, justice, equality, mutual beneficial cooperation. Fourth, it should use innovative and inclusive solutions, including digital and technological tools. Fifth, it should strengthen capacities of individual states and international organizations. Sixth, it should promote people-centered international cooperation at the core. This is the answer given by the BRICS. He added that the BRICS countries were, indeed, different from a few developed countries in their attitude towards multilateralism and multilateral cooperation. The BRICS countries stressed the need to observe the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and oppose exceptionalism and double standard, he said. We are committed to extensive consultation, joint contribution and shared benefits, and oppose hegemonic bullying and zero-sum games. We pursue openness, inclusiveness and win-win cooperation, and reject bloc politics and ideological confrontation. U.S. Senate report puts spotlight on failures during Capitol attack. It pinpoints security missteps, leaves Trump's role unprobed. Systemic collapse. Pro-Trump protesters storming the U.S. Capitol in Washington on January 6. Reuters Shannon Stapleton. Associated Press Washington. A Senate investigation of the January 6 insurrection at the U.S. Capitol has uncovered broad government, military and law enforcement missteps surrounding the violent attack, including a breakdown within multiple intelligence agencies and a lack of training and preparation for Capitol police officers who were quickly overwhelmed by the rioters. The report released on Tuesday is the first, and could be the last, bipartisan review of how hundreds of former President Donald Trump's supporters were able to violently break into the Capitol that day, interrupting the certification of President Joe Biden's victory. Sweeping changes. It includes new details about the police officers on the front lines who suffered chemical burns, brain injuries and broken bones, and who told senators that they were left with no direction when command systems broke down. It recommends immediate changes to give the Capitol Police Chief more authority, to provide better planning and equipment for law enforcement, and to streamline intelligence gathering among federal agencies. As a bipartisan effort, the report does not delve into the root causes of the attack, including Mr. Trump's role as he called for his supporters to fight like hell to overturn his election defeat that day. It does not call the attack an insurrection, even though it was. And it comes 2 weeks after Republicans blocked a bipartisan, independent commission that would investigate the insurrection more broadly. This report is important in the fact that it allows us to make some immediate improvements to the security situation here in the Capitol, said Michigan Senator Gary Peters, the chairman of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, which conducted the probe along with the Senate Rules Committee. The report details hours of calls between officials in the Capitol and the Pentagon as the then chief of the Capitol Police, Stephen Sund, desperately begged for help. It finds that the Pentagon spent hours, mission planning, and seeking multiple layers of approvals as Capitol Police were being overwhelmed and brutally beaten by the rioters. The senators also criticized the FBI and the Homeland Security Department for downplaying online threats and for not issuing intelligence bulletins that help law enforcement plan. China offers ASEAN nations support on vaccines. It seeks deeper economic ties to offset maritime disputes, push back against US outreach in the region. Anant Krishnan. China on Tuesday offered ASEAN countries its vaccines as well as closer cooperation on joint vaccine development and production, as it hosted 10 foreign ministers from the Southeast Asian grouping. The meeting comes as China looks to deepen its economic ties with the region as well as push back at what it sees as a renewed effort at regional engagement from the new Biden administration in the US in particular, as well as from the India-Australia-Japan U.S. Quad grouping, which earlier this year came out with a regional vaccine initiative. On Tuesday, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi told the visiting ministers that China and ASEAN should jointly carry forward Asian values, in a subtle dig at the West. President Xi Jinping had in 2014 put forward the idea that it was for Asian people to uphold Asia's security. Mr. Wang made a similar point on Tuesday, saying that, taking root in the Oriental tradition, both sides should strengthen mutual learning and cultural exchanges, and carry forward Asian values, instilling positive energy to global and regional governance. Both sides should continue to embrace the Asian way of consensus building and accommodating each other's comfort levels, build an inclusive and coexisted family, and forge a cooperation circle featuring common development, he said. We should adhere to independence, self-reliance and self-strengthening to support the ASEAN integration, and forge a closer community with a shared future. China's hosting of the ASEAN foreign ministers in the city of Chongqing marked the 30th anniversary of ties and came as Beijing deals with recent disputes with both the Philippines and Malaysia. The meeting reiterated the need to advance consultations on the code of conduct in the South China Sea, but as the recent incidents underlined, progress has been slow. Beijing is banking on deep economic links to both offset maritime disputes and the push among some ASEAN countries for closer defense ties with the US amid their concerns about China's growing military footprint in the South China Sea. Mr. Wang said China-ASEAN trade had grown to $684.6 billion and the expectation is for that to only grow following the signing of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership (RCEP) trade deal. On COVID-19, China said it would do its best to provide vaccines to ASEAN countries and strengthen cooperation in vaccine R&D, production, procurement, vaccination, and supervision with other countries, Mr. Wang said, as he also put forward a proposal to implement a China-ASEAN Public Health Cooperation Initiative, and an ASEAN Regional Reserve of Medical Supplies for Public Health Emergencies. Macron slapped in the face during walkabout incident draws widespread condemnation. Emmanuel Macron. Reuters Paris. French President Emmanuel Macron was slapped in the face while greeting a crowd in southeast France on Tuesday, a security scare that drew widespread condemnation ahead of regional elections this month. Video footage on social media showed Mr. Macron approach a barrier to meet and shake hands with voters, where a man in a green t-shirt took hold of his elbow and said a few words before slapping him. Mr. Macron's bodyguards quickly intervened and 2 people were detained afterwards, local officials said. 2 28-year-old men living in the region are being questioned, the local prosecutor's office said, but, at this stage of questioning, their motives remain unknown. FBI run-up tricks criminal gangs globally. 800 arrested. The operation led to police raids in 16 nations, Drug seizures. A box containing cash discovered during a raid in New Zealand. APNZ Police. Associated Press. The Hague. Criminal gangs divulged plans for moving drug shipments and carrying out killings on a messaging app secretly run by the FBI, law enforcement agencies said on Tuesday, as they unveiled a global sting operation they said dealt an unprecedented blow to organized crime in countries around the world. The operation, known as Trojan Shield, led to police raids in 16 nations. More than 800 suspects were arrested and more than 32 tons of drugs, including cocaine, cannabis, amphetamines and methamphetamines, were seized along with 250 firearms, 55 luxury cars and more than $148 million in cash and cryptocurrencies. The seeds of the sting were sown when law enforcement agencies earlier took down two encrypted platforms, EncroChat and SkyECC, that had been used by criminal gangs to organize drug trafficking and underworld hits. With the gangs in the market for a new means of communication, the FBI stepped in with a covertly developed app called Anom that was installed on modified mobile phones. World Bank sees India growing by 8.3%, lenders says forecast. However, masks damage from COVID second wave, pegs global growth at 5.6%. Widening gap, highly unequal, access to vaccines is a factor in the uneven global recovery, says World Bank file photo. Shriram Lakshman, Washington, D.C. India's economy is expected to grow by 8.3% in the fiscal year that began in April 2021, the World Bank forecast in its June 2021 Global Economic Prospects released on Tuesday. The forecast, however, masked the significant expected economic damage caused by the enormous second wave of COVID-19, the bank said. Raising its projection for global growth, the bank said the world economy would expand at 5.6% in 2021, the fastest post-recession growth rate in 80 years, underpinned by US stimulus spending and faster growth in China. Observing that global output would still end up 2% below pre-pandemic projections by the year end, the development lender said, highly unequal access to COVID-19 vaccines was a factor in the uneven recovery. In India, an enormous second COVID-19 wave is undermining the sharper than expected rebound in activity seen during the second half of FY 2020/21, especially in services. With surging COVID-19 cases, foot traffic around work and retail spaces has again slowed to more than one-third below pre-pandemic levels since March, in part due to greater restrictions on mobility, the bank noted. Collapse and recovery. Economic activity in India would likely follow a similar but less pronounced collapse and recovery trend seen during the first wave, the bank said in its outlook. The pandemic will undermine consumption and investment as confidence remains depressed and balance sheets damaged. Growth in FY 2022/23 is expected to slow to 7.5%, reflecting lingering impacts of COVID-19 on household, corporate and bank balance sheets, possibly low levels of consumer confidence, and heightened uncertainty on job and income prospects, the global lender added. For the world as a whole, losses to per capita income would not be reversed by 2022 for some two-thirds of emerging market and developing economies, the bank said. Low-income countries that had lagged in vaccinations had witnessed a reversal in poverty reduction, with the pandemic exacerbating insecurity and other long-standing challenges. While there are welcome signs of global recovery, the pandemic continues to inflict poverty and inequality on people in developing countries, World Bank Group President David Malpass said in a press release. Globally coordinated efforts are essential to accelerate vaccine distribution and debt relief, particularly for low-income countries, Mr. Malpass added. Textile units in Kanpur, Chennai Kanchipuram worst hit by COVID stress credit to sector fell 20%, SIDBI report. Special correspondent New Delhi. India's textile clusters in Kanpur and Chennai Kanchipuram have been worst hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, with the highest proportion of loans turning delinquent by December 2020, according to a report. The country's textiles industry has been in trouble since the national lockdown imposed in March last year, with outstanding credit to the sector falling 20% year-on-year by December 2020 and loans to export units falling by a sharper 25%, according to a SIDBI CRIF report on the sector released on Tuesday. The textiles and apparel industry provides direct and indirect employment to an estimated 10.5 crore Indians and contributes 2% to GDP. A recent short survey carried out by SIDBI of textile units in Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana and Gujarat revealed that the sector also faces several operational roadblocks at the ground level, including high fuel and raw material prices, challenging GST norms and delayed tax refunds. Almost 82% of loans extended to textile units in Kanpur had turned delinquent by December 2020, with the Chennai Kanchipuram belt reporting a delinquency rate of 42.6% of outstanding credit. Loans are labeled delinquent after past dues accumulate for more than 90 days. Lowest in Ahmedabad, the Pune-Kolhapur belt, and the Ludhiana-Jalandhar-Amritsar textile region reported delinquency rates of 32% and 29% in the same period. Ahmedabad and Tirupur-Coimbatore-Madurai recorded the lowest proportion of loans going bad, at 8.24% and 8.6%, respectively, compared with the overall delinquency rate of 16.4% in the textiles sector. Among micro, small and medium textile enterprises, the textiles cluster in Punjab reported the highest delinquencies at almost 25%, followed by Chennai Kanchipuram, 23.6%, and Hyderabad Guntur, 22.8%. The SIDBI survey found that ongoing changes in the GST portal and filing of returns has created confusion for units, with exporters stating that getting integrated GST refunds is a major challenge. The lack of clarity on the export benefits that would accrue under the new remission of duties and taxes on export products, RoDTEP, scheme, isn't helping. Most units said access to working capital was a challenge and cash flows were constrained, while ever-increasing fuel prices have escalated transport costs. The rise in yarn and other raw material prices, and fluctuating cotton prices, are also difficult to cope with, even as export orders have slowed down due to COVID-19, the survey found. Jobs outlook likely to be stable for 3 months. 54% employers to hire in June, survey. Special correspondent Bangalore. India's employment outlook would be more or less stable for the next 3 months of calendar 2021, a survey by Manpower Group Employment Outlook survey showed. Workforce gains are anticipated in 6 of the 7 industry sectors during the upcoming quarter. While the transportation and utilities sector would be the strongest job market with a net employment outlook of plus 10%, the outlook for the services sector would be plus 7%. However, mining and construction sector employers are expected to trim payrolls, reporting a weak outlook of 2%, The survey conducted across 1,303 enterprises revealed the strongest hiring pace was recorded in the medium-sized organizations, followed by large enterprises. About 54% of the respondents said they would hire in June 2021, while 46% did not know when they would resume regular hiring. About 40% expected to have their employees work from home full-time, while 38% wanted to have either flexible or condensed work hours for their employees. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video as a podcast. Do like, share and comment. Press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get new notifications. Thank you. Take care and stay safe. God bless you all. Jai Maa Bharti. To download news and editorials in MP3, follow us on Telegram, Virtual School. The link is provided in the description below.